Welcome into the 7-round mock draft for the Cincinnati Bengals. Bengals have locked up Jamar Chase, which I think we all knew was going to happen eventually, but they also locked up T. Higgins, 4-year, $115 million. The Bengals are back, baby. We are so here. All right, look, we're going to get into it right now. I'm going to put it up on the screen for you guys. And look, before we get started here, I do want to talk about the plan for this draft. I believe in my heart of hearts that the Bengals are a Super Bowl window type of team, all right? I believe just in general, if you have Jamar Chase and you have Joe Burrow and you have T. Higgins and you have Chase Brown, you can win a Super Bowl with those pieces, all right? Now, obviously, the defense was not good enough last year. We got to add pieces to the defense. We're spending all this money on the offense. We're going to have to build the defense through the draft. So it's really, for me, defense, pretty much wherever we want to go with it. And interior offensive line. I want to help out Joe Burrow on the interior. I like our tackles. We got Orlando Brown and Mims on the tackle side. I'm fine with those big, burly humans that I think are fine there. Mims has to obviously progress, but as a first-round pick last year, I actually liked what we saw down the stretch. So that's kind of how we're going to approach this draft. Let's get right into it here. And looking at the 17th pick, wow, this ran pretty well for us. If this is our situation, I think we love it. Just looking at some of the names that went off the board, obviously, a lot of these defensive players would have been in play. Will Johnson is going to be a huge thought for me. Now, my instinct is edge, right? My instinct is defensive line. For the first pick, that's kind of where I wanted to go. That was what I was thinking. But I look at these names, and I know James Pierce Jr. is highly regarded on this website. I throw him right kind of in the middle with the rest of them. I mean, they're different types of players, but as far as draft value, I don't have him marketably higher than, even a Nick Sorton. I have Landon Jackson. Like, they're Landon Jackson and Pierce Jr. in the same realm for me. So we're not going to consider him. And look, obviously I'm not going to agree with all of these rankings, and I'm going to kind of try and piece together what I think. But I think really second and third round for this draft is going to be defensive line heavy. There's going to be a lot of good NFL starters that come out of those rounds, and I think the Bengals have to address that. Now, in the first round, I definitely thought that was going to be a conversation. Now, if we look at offensive line, we're going to look at interior. Now, I do believe Kevin Banks Jr. is ultimately going to be a guard in the NFL. I think he's a first-round guy. I think Tyler Booker probably going to be a first-round guy. He's definitely a guard in the NFL. A lot of tackles that are going to be considered a tackle in this list that are really realistically just going to move inside and be good guards for us. So we might draft some tackles that end up being guards. Ultimately, and I kind of knew my decision when I saw this, but I did want to talk out the conversation. I think Will Johnson it should still be a top 10 pick. I think this is a little bit of a Derek Stingley conversation. Maybe not exactly the same level. I think Derek Stingley was one of the more impressive freshman corners that you'll ever see. Will Johnson, maybe not that level, but a tick down. But the idea that his last season in college, when he knows he's going to the NFL, he's on maybe not the greatest team in the world, and it's just a little bit of a slump, right? Derek Stingley had that, but he still went top 10 to the Texans. Will Johnson not getting that same kind of respect. I think he has a chance to go a lot sooner than this. I don't expect him to be on the board for you guys, but in this situation, he's on the board for the Bengals. We're going to take him. We're going to help out that corner spot. And now, at least for me, we're not going to worry about corner for the next couple rounds. And I like that ultimately because it does put us in a really, really good spot to get some really, really good spot talent on the off defensive line. So we're going to look. There's only two spots for me that I would consider here. I'm going to consider interior offensive line. Like I said, I like these names. I think a couple of these guys, like Essere is not going to be on our board because I don't see him transitioning to tackle. Williams, I maybe could see transitioning to guard. Embo, same kind of conversation, probably not transitioning to guard. These are some true tackle spots, and then we're going to get later down the line where we talk about guard. And really, the second round, like I said, ultimately, I believe, is the spot for defensive line. This is an interesting spot. At 49, I think this is a very realistic combination of names that are going to be there, right? I believe, again, realistically, could a Landon Jackson fall? I don't think so. I think I actually like Landon Jackson in the late first, early second range. I don't expect him to fall this far outside of the top 40. Tyleik Williams could absolutely be there. Just going down the line of names that could be there, I think, Nick Scorton, I could see falling. There's a real possibility that a guy, and I'm just trying to find his name, Walter Nolan, D tackle out of Ole Miss, who is just, there's off the field concerns with him as far as like just character, and I know the Bengals take shots on guys like that, but the upside is pretty real. So I think that there's a possibility that a guy like that is there in this spot. But for this mock, the way we're going to play it out, I think we have some interesting options. Now, do we take and I'm not even going to pretend to say this dude's name, Ole Miss, the athlete out of Ole Miss, all right? You're going to want him to be a little stronger. You're not going to want to play him in the run early on in his career. Like, again, play strength is an issue for me, and I do wish that he was maybe just if he was more explosive, he's a first-round pick, obviously, so there's a reason he's here. Like, if he measured out like the kid out of Tennessee did, like we were talking about earlier, then yeah, he's not here on the board. So he's not that, but he's a tier down from that, and he does have some explosiveness. He does have some really high level pass rushing potential, NFL potential for him. So we could talk about that spot, but again, do the Bengals want to take him over a guy who maybe could play the defensive end position better? Because if we're talking about defensive end, I'm going to look at JT. Again, not going to pretend to say the last name. It would just be disrespectful for me to try to say some of these names. I don't like Braden Swinson here. I love Shamir Turner. He is that interior defensive lineman that could play pretty much across the defensive line, in my opinion. You're not going to make a living putting him out on the end, but he could do it, and he could do it at a pretty good rate. Like, again, he's very versatile defensive lineman, and you could take him. I like all of these guys. I like the potential of a lot of these guys. I think I would rather have the guy who can rush the passer. If I'm building the Super Bowl winning Bengals team in my head, I'm going to take the shot on a guy who can bring down the quarterback when it's 3rd and 7 and they're trying to go tie the game in the fourth quarter, right? I want the guy who can end the game. All right, we know we have the offense that can score 35 to 40 a game, and they're probably still going to need to this year, but we're trying to improve and make it to where, 35 is a guaranteed win and not like, oh, shit, I hope the defense holds up on this last play, because they just didn't a lot last year. So we're going to go with that. I kind of talked it out. I think you could make a really good argument for a lot of those names. So let's see where we're at here. In the third round, we're running out of guys who we really, really can trust. Let's see if we can do something on the defensive line again. And yeah, none of the top names are there. There's no second round picks still here. Like, these are all, late third guys for me. I like Q Robinson out of Alabama. Speed rusher, has some traits. I can definitely make some arguments here, but we can readdress. We can look at this a little bit later. Interior is really, really important, and I see a name that I like that I could easily turn into a guard. So let's look at some of these. Tate Ratledge, true guard. Charles Grant, you can move him inside to guard. I think we're going to go ahead and take Tate Ratledge. I don't feel like he's the best mover in the world, but at the interior, that's why he's there. But big pass-blocking guard that I think would fit the system pretty well. So, again, I think we're adding a guy that starts day one in the third round. That's what I was hoping for. I think that's your best-case scenario. You go, maybe some more impactful positions early on, and you take the interior in the third. All right, and as we get into the fourth round, just looking at the picks that we made, I love this draft. We can come out of this draft for the Bengals with a starting corner. You love that. I mean, this is a guy that I really believe day one. The fact that he was there kind of changed everything for me, because I really thought we were going to go D-line first round, just because I didn't expect him to be there, and then we were going to probably take a shot on a corner in the second or third. With that, we go to the second. We take we talked about the different names that you could have gone there, but had to address the defensive line. And then we go guard in the third. And look, as we kind of talk about the strategy of this draft, which is what I'm really into, team building, strategy, things like that, I think you can make an argument for doubling down on guard or interior offensive line, wherever you want to go with it. I think you can make a real argument for doubling down on defensive line, and I think that's probably where I would go. We had the retirement, obviously, didn't really bring anybody in. We re-signed DJ, and there's just not enough names that I feel really good about, and again, I want – you got to be able to close out games at the end, right? You know what your team is. You know your team is built through your offense. That's where all your money is. So we got to protect the passer, obviously, and that's important, but we got to find cheap players that can get production, right? So as we look at this defensive situation, a lot of interesting names. I again, and we're gonna go with another guy that I don't think I can say his last name, but this edge rusher out of UCLA. I'll click on him here, give you the looks. Yeah, 6'3", 250, a little undersized, but he's explosive and he has some long arms. He has some traits that I like. I'm a fan of his in this range. I definitely think that. I mean, he could go maybe a little bit earlier, but another guy at UCLA, it wasn't a great team, but he was I think a bright spot on that defense. I just believe in this dude. I believe in this dude in this range, so we're gonna go with the guy that I just believe in. Let's look at running back, because I do think there's some value in this range, drafting a backup running back for Chase Brown. You want a guy who can spell. Problem is, I mean, look, Trevor Etienne is going to be a great change of pace back. You can throw out of the backfield. That we like that. Undersized, but I mean, again, undersized brother of a superstar from the ACC coming out of Georgia. We've heard this story before. Is this the next James Cook? Maybe. I don't know. I don't think so personally. I really wish he would have stayed a year. I think he had a lot to offer. Monungai, he's a guy. Tough physical run. Similar, not the same, but similar to Isaiah Pacheco coming out of Rutgers, similar vibe. Tootin's not going to be here. I don't understand why he's explosive, fast. You would absolutely draft him in the 5th if he was there. I think there's too many names at the running back position, even in the 5th. And again, a lot of these guys could still be here, but there's too many names in the 5th because I can scroll. I can talk about South Carolina's Marks, who's a name. I can talk about Montrell Johnson, who's, again, a name. These are guys that have NFL traits. I'm not telling you they're superstars, but they have NFL traits that you like from the running back position. So I think we're probably going to go running back with a 6th round pick. We'll see who's left there out of those spots, and let's just grab a position that we think could be useful. Seth McLaughlin is going to be a name that I'm going to think about in this range especially. I love him in the 5th round. I think he's going to be an asset for whoever drafts him. I think he's going to get drafted a little bit earlier than people think. Guy who had I believe it was an Achilles injury late in the season, so he's not going to be super useful for you in the first year. But again, we already did draft the guard. It says center. I think he could kick over to guard. I think that's my pick here. Let's just grab another offensive lineman. Let's protect Joe Burrow. We're doubling up, obviously, but we're gonna have to do that. And then let's look at the running backs. Tootin's still here. I'm going to take Tootin, but I'm going to tell you, that's just not realistic. If you can grab Tootin in the 6th round, that's ridiculous. I've done a draft profile on him. I'm a big fan of his. So, obviously, just explosive. I mean, he ran one of the fastest times at the combine, but he's a big-bodied. I mean, he's not small by any means. He has the running back look. Tajay Brooks is another name that he's a guy that I think could be here that you would think about. But, man, if you can get him to spell Chase Brown, that's a dynamic combination. And he didn't catch the ball a ton out of the backfield in college, but he showed that he could do it a little bit at the Senior Bowl. I think he's going to improve in that, and obviously that's a big part of what the Bengals do. Overall, this is exactly the type of draft that I expect the Bengals to get. Obviously, the names are going to be a little bit different, but again, Bengals are going to have to address the defense. If they go all defense in this draft, it wouldn't shock me. I felt like we had to address the interior offensive line. They have the tackle position set for the most part. Now, if the Bengals want to draft your swing tackle and mold a guy who can probably take over for Brown in a couple years, that's great. I have no problem with that. I didn't do that in this draft. I drafted a little bit more for need, and then Seth McLaughlin, who I think is going to be a good starter in the NFL. I really do. I don't love the hate that he gets. I know he had the injury, but I like him. Tate Ratledge, I think, Probably going to go ultimately a little earlier than this. Again, not going to try and say Princely's last name, but this is a good value for that spot in the second round. I thought we got good value out of the UCLA kid as well, and then Tootin, insane value. I don't think he'll be there, but I do think there's a real value for the Bengals drafting a running back in a great running back class. And realistically, are the Bengals going to pay Chase Brown in a couple years? Probably not. I mean, your money's tied up in other pieces on the offense. You're going to have to pay some defensive players. So I would expect that's not going to happen. So, yeah, you get a Tootin late. He's going to just round out that running back room, and that's probably what the running back's position is going to be for however long this iteration of the Bengals team is. You know, you're paying your wide receivers. Look, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, you have potentially 3 Hall of Fame players on the offense. I mean, that's pretty cool. That's pretty special. You can win a Super Bowl with that. Let's draft the defense. Let's figure it out with athletes, especially on the back end and the secondary. Like, we're gonna have to figure it out with some of the guys that we drafted that have just been okay, and some athletes that we're gonna have to find. But we found some explosive playmakers on the defensive line in this draft. I think we helped ourselves in the interior offensive line, which was important. Overall, I really believe if they could pull these names, you have a team that can win any given week, any given Sunday. I mean, they're going to be able to outscore any team in the NFL on any given week with Joe Burrow, Chase Brown, Chase Young, Jamar Chase. All right, I'm talking too long if I'm bringing up Chase Young because there's just too many Chases in my head apparently. All right, y'all. Look, end of the day, super excited for what the Bengals could be next year. Super excited to see what Joe Burrow can be. I'm rooting for him. I really, really don't want to see Joe Burrow have the type of career that my boy Dan Marino had. Obviously, I'm a Dolphins fan, but I have a picture of the greatest non-Super Bowl winning quarterback of all time behind me, and I stand by that. I will argue that till the day I die. Joe Burrow has a chance to obviously win a Super Bowl still, but I mean, if he didn't, he would supplant Dan Marino, in my opinion. That's the type of guy we're talking about. I don't want that to happen. I want the Bengals to get there. Really, really rooting for this iteration of this football team. It's fun to watch just as a fan. But all right, that's all I got. Thank you so much for watching. Peace.